In the winter of 1773, the city of Boston was tense. Anger was growing among the American colonists, and many people believed their rights were being ignored. At the time, the American colonies were ruled by Great Britain. The British government controlled the colonies and passed laws that affected millions of people living in America. But there was one major problem. The colonists had no representatives in the British Parliament. That meant they had no real voice in the decisions being made about them. This situation led to a powerful and famous phrase, taxation without representation. And soon, this frustration would explode into one of the most famous protests in American history, the Boston Tea Party. After the expensive 7 Years' War, Britain was deeply in debt. To recover financially, the British government decided that the American colonies should help pay for the war. So Britain began placing taxes on goods in the colonies. One of the earliest examples was the Stamp Act of 1765, which required colonists to pay taxes on printed materials like newspapers, legal documents, and even playing cards. Colonists were furious. Many believed these taxes were unfair because they had no representation in Parliament. Protests broke out across the colonies. People boycotted British goods, and eventually Britain was forced to repeal the Stamp Act. But the tension did not disappear. In 1773, the British government passed another law that would anger the colonists even more. The Tea Act. The Tea Act allowed the powerful British East India Company to sell tea directly to the Americans. At first, this might sound like good news. The tea was actually cheaper than before.
But there was a hidden purpose. The British government wanted the colonists to accept the tax on tea. If they bought the tea, they would be quietly accepting Britain's right to tax them. To them, it wasn't about the price of tea. It was about freedom and political rights. In Boston, resistance became especially strong. A secret group of patriots called the Sons of Liberty began organizing protests against the Tea Act. One of the key leaders of this group was Samuel Adams. He and others believed that the tea shipments arriving in Boston must not be allowed to land. In late 1773, 3 British ships arrived in Boston Harbor carrying large shipments of tea. The ships were called the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver. The colonists demanded that the ships return to England without unloading the tea. But the royal governor of Massachusetts, Thomas Hutchinson, refused to allow the ships to leave. This created a dangerous situation. If the colonists stopped it, they would be directly challenging British authority. If the tea was unloaded, the tax would be enforced. The tension in Boston grew stronger every day.
On the evening of December 16, 1773, thousands of people gather in Boston to discuss what to do next. After hours of debate, a group of men made a bold decision. That night, members of the Sons of Liberty disguised themselves as Native Americans. This disguise helped hide their identities and symbolized that they were Americans, not British subjects. Silently and quickly, they boarded the 3 ships carrying tea. Once on board, they began opening the large wooden chests. Inside each chest was tea imported from Britain. The protesters smashed the chests open with axes and dumped the tea into the cold harbor water. One by one, the chests were thrown overboard. By the end of the night, 342 chests of tea had been destroyed. The harbor was filled with floating tea leaves, and the protest had been carried out without harming a single person. It was a powerful message to Britain. When news of the Boston Tea Party reached Britain, the government was furious. British leaders believed the colonists had destroyed valuable property and openly challenged their authority. In response, Britain passed a series of harsh laws known as the Intolerable Acts. One of these laws closed Boston Harbor until the colonists paid for the destroyed tea. Another law reduced the self-government of Massachusetts. These punishments were meant to bring the colonies under tighter British control, but instead, they had the opposite effect. The colonies began uniting against Britain. The punishment of Boston shocked people throughout the American colonies. Many colonists believed Britain had gone too far. In 1774, representatives from different colonies met at the First Continental Congress to discuss how to respond to British actions. This meeting helped bring the colonies together for the first time. Just 2 years later, the colonies would declare independence from Britain in 1776, and the American Revolutionary War would begin. The Boston Tea Party was more than just a protest about tea. It was a powerful symbol of resistance against unfair laws and taxation. The events of that night showed that the colonists were willing to stand up for their rights, even if it meant challenging one of the most powerful empires in the world. What began with 342 chests of tea thrown into the harbor helped ignite a revolution that would eventually lead to the birth of a new nation.
The United States.